My name is Abigail Patterson, and I'm 34 years old. I built a $22 million business from nothing but an idea and determination. No college degree, just hard work and vision. Yet despite supporting my family financially for years, my dad still called me a lowlife and kicked me out of their lives. Funny how success doesn't equal respect in some families. Today, I'm watching the waves from my Florida beach house, finally at peace with my choices. The journey here wasn't easy, but it was worth every tear and triumph. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and join me as I share how losing my family actually set me free. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a place where traditional values run deep and education is viewed as the only legitimate path to success. My father, Robert Patterson, worked as an accountant at the same firm for 30 years. He wore his CPA license like a badge of honor, often reminding us that education is the only thing no one can take from you. My mother, Helen, taught high school English and shared my father's reverence for academic credentials. Their mantra was simple: go to school, get good grades, attend a respectable college, secure a stable career. From childhood, I sensed my path might be different. While my parents dreamed of raising a doctor or lawyer, I was busy selling handmade friendship bracelets to classmates in 4th grade. By 12, I'd graduated to running the most profitable lemonade stand in our neighborhood, experimenting with different flavor combinations and learning what customers would pay premium prices for. It's cute now, my mother would say, but these little projects won't pay the bills when you grow up. High school brought more of the same tension. While I was selling custom-decorated phone cases to students and making enough to buy my first car outright, my parents were focused on my SAT prep and college applications. I maintained decent grades, enough to get into state university, but my heart wasn't in academia. It was in creating, selling, connecting with customers. Just get your degree first, Dad insisted whenever I shared a new business idea. Then you can play entrepreneur if you still want to. To please them, I enrolled at State University as a business major. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was studying business in classrooms while itching to build one in the real world. To help pay tuition, I took a job at a local retail store selling women's accessories. That's where lightning struck. I noticed a pattern in customer complaints about online shopping, particularly the disconnect between what women saw in photos and what arrived in the mail. The idea hit me like a freight train, a platform where real women with different body types could see how clothing items actually looked on someone with their shape before purchasing. The concept consumed me. I spent every spare moment researching, planning, and building a basic prototype website. My grades began to slip as my passion project demanded more attention. Halfway through junior year, I made the decision that would alter the course of my life. I sat my parents down at our kitchen table and told them I was dropping out to pursue my business idea full-time. The silence that followed was deafening. "Absolutely not," my father finally said, his voice eerily calm. "No daughter of mine is going to throw away her education for some internet fantasy." My mother began to cry. "Abigail, please don't ruin your life. You're so close to finishing." But my mind was made up. The next day, I withdrew from my classes and used my tuition refund as seed money for what would eventually become Try Before, my e-commerce platform. The aftermath was brutal. My parents barely spoke to me for weeks. When they did, it was to express disappointment or to ask when I'd come to my senses. I moved out of their house and into a tiny studio apartment that doubled as my office. The space was so small I had to fold up my futon each morning to make room for my desk. Those early days were a blur of 18-hour workdays, ramen noodles, and determination. I built the first version of the website myself, learning coding through free online resources. I convinced local boutiques to let me photograph their clothing on different-sized volunteers in exchange for free publicity. Each night, I fell asleep to the glow of my laptop, exhausted but exhilarated. 3 months in, the site went live. The first sale came 2 days later. Then another. then 10 more. By month 6, we were processing over 50 orders daily, and I had hired my first part-time employee, a photographer named Rachel who believed in the vision as much as I did. At the 1-year mark, I invited my parents to see the small office space I'd leased. I thought seeing the physical manifestation of my dream might help them understand. "It's nice," my mother offered hesitantly, looking around at the modest space. My father nodded stiffly. "How much are you making after expenses?" When I showed him the books, we were actually profitable, a rarity for startups our age. He simply said, "Let's hope it lasts. It's not too late to go back and finish your degree." That night, I cried myself to sleep, not from sadness, but frustration. I was building something real, something that helped women feel confident in their purchases, and it still wasn't enough. But I dried my tears by morning and got back to work. If I couldn't earn their approval, I'd at least prove to myself that I'd made the right choice. Little did I know then that financial success would only widen the rift between us, or that the daughter they considered a disappointment would one day be their financial savior. The transition from startup to actual company happened so gradually that sometimes I didn't notice the milestones until they'd passed. One day I was working alone. The next, I had 5 employees crammed into our tiny office space, the air conditioning struggling to keep up with the body heat and humming computers. Try Before's concept resonated deeply with women tired of the online shopping disappointment cycle. Our platform allowed users to upload their measurements and see clothes modeled by women with similar body types. What made us unique was our real body approach. We refused to use professional models and instead featured actual customers who received store credit for modeling new arrivals. 18 months after launch, we hit a roadblock. Our server kept crashing from increased traffic, and we needed capital to scale properly. After 67 rejections from investors, many who suggested I find a technical co-founder, code for a man who knows computers, I finally found a believer in Janet Kingsley, a female angel investor who had built and sold 2 tech companies. "You've created something I wish existed when I was younger," she told me after our pitch. "And you've done it without burning through mountains of cash. That's rare." Her investment of $500,000 for a 15% stake valued Try Before at just over $3 million, a number that seems surreal to me. I celebrated by upgrading from ramen to actual groceries and finally paying myself a modest salary. With Janet's guidance and capital, we rebuilt the platform from the ground up, adding features users had been requesting: virtual try-on technology, size comparison across brands, and a community section where women shared styling advice. Our team expanded to 20 people, requiring a move to a proper office with conference rooms and a kitchen. The press began to take notice. First came features in local business journals, then fashion blogs, and finally a profile in Fast Company highlighting female founders disrupting e-commerce. Each media hit brought a surge of new users. By year 3, we'd crossed the $1 million revenue threshold. I bought myself a modest condo, nothing fancy, but mine, and sent my parents a check to help with some home repairs they'd been putting off. They cashed it without comment. At family gatherings, my father still introduced me as my daughter who didn't finish college, never my daughter who runs a successful tech company. My mother would find ways to steer conversations toward my cousin's academic achievements, Madison's law school graduation, Tyler's medical residency. "We're so proud of you all," she'd say, her eyes carefully avoiding mine. Once, at my grandmother's birthday dinner, an aunt asked about my business after seeing an article in her local paper. "Oh, Abigail got lucky with that internet thing," my father interjected before I could answer. Good timing, right place. Like those people who bought Bitcoin early. I sat there, stunned into silence. For years of working until my eyes burned, of learning every aspect of e-commerce and programming, of building relationships with vendors and customers, reduced to lucky. That night, I added a sticky note to my bathroom mirror: "Your worth isn't determined by their recognition." By year 5, Try Before had grown to over 100 employees. We'd expanded internationally, with dedicated sites for Canadian, UK, and Australian markets. Our revenue hit $8 million annually with healthy profit margins that would make most tech startups envious. Industry recognition poured in. I was named to Forbes 30 Under 30 list for retail innovation. We won a Webby Award for Best Shopping Experience. CNBC featured me in a special on self-made entrepreneurs. I sent my parents links to every article, every award announcement, every television appearance. Sometimes they'd respond with a brief nice or congratulations. Most times silence. At my high school reunion, former classmates approached me with awe and questions about entrepreneurship. My former economics teacher asked if I would speak to his students about business development. In the eyes of my hometown, I had become something of a success story. Everyone seemed to recognize what I'd built, everyone except the two people whose approval I'd sought most. By the 6-year mark, Try Before's valuation had climbed to $15 million. We'd moved into premium office space in downtown Cedar Rapids, complete with the exposed brick walls and open floor plan that had once seemed like an impossible dream. My team had grown to include brilliant minds from across the country, many who relocated specifically to work with us. I bought a house. Nothing extravagant by wealthy standards, but certainly nice, in a lakeside community 20 minutes from my parents. I thought perhaps physical proximity might bridge the emotional distance. It didn't. Must be nice to afford all this without student loans, my father remarked during his one and only visit, gesturing around my living room with its view of the water. The comment stung, but I'd grown accustomed to the tiny barbs. What I couldn't have anticipated was how soon I'd move from disappointment to financial lifeline in my parents' eyes, or how little that transition would change how they saw me. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a strategy meeting when my assistant mouthed, "Your mother," and handed me the phone. Mom never called during work hours. Dad's been let go, she said without preamble, her voice tight with anxiety. Budget cuts. After 30 years. At 58, my father was suddenly unemployed. The accounting firm he devoted his career to had been acquired by a larger company, and they were streamlining operations. His position was deemed redundant. What can I do? I asked immediately. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Pride warring with necessity. We'll be fine, she finally said. I just thought you should know. But they weren't fine. Within 2 months, their savings had dwindled. My father struggled to find new employment, too experienced, expensive, for entry-level positions, too specialized for lateral moves. Meanwhile, my mother began experiencing severe migraines that eventually led to a diagnosis requiring specialized treatment their insurance only partially covered. I didn't wait for them to ask. I simply took action. First, I paid off the remainder of their mortgage, $167,000, that freed up $1,500 in monthly expenses for them. I covered my mother's medical bills and arranged for her to see specialists not covered by their insurance. When their 12-year-old car broke down, I had a new SUV delivered to their driveway. We can't accept this, my father said stiffly when I visited. You can, and you will, I replied. Consider it payback for raising me. He took the keys. What began as emergency assistance evolved into regular financial support. I set up a monthly transfer to their account, enough to cover utilities, groceries, and insurance premiums. When their kitchen needed renovation, I paid for it. When the roof began leaking, I replaced it. During this same period, my younger brother Mark was accepted to an expensive private college. Without discussion, I covered his tuition, room, and board. For my sister Emma's wedding, I wrote a check that gave her the celebration our parents could no longer afford. The money flowed one way, from my bank account to my family's needs. The acknowledgement of what this represented, however, never followed the same path. The business must be doing well, my mother would comment when depositing my checks, as if the funds appeared by magic rather than through my continued hard work. God provides, my father would say at family dinners I paid for, somehow missing that in this equation, I was the instrument of provision. At a holiday gathering, I overheard him telling relatives, "It's just temporary until I'm back on my feet." Abigail's doing fine right now with her internet shop. Internet shop. A $15 million company with international reach reduced to a hobby. My sister Emma noticed my expression and squeezed my hand under the table. "They just don't understand what you've built," she whispered. "But I do. It's amazing, Abby." That small acknowledgement meant more than she could know. As Try Before continued to grow, so did my family's financial dependence on me. Dad eventually found part-time consulting work, but it paid a fraction of his former salary. Mom's health issues prevented her return to full-time teaching. I became the unofficial family bank, the source of emergency funds, home repairs, car payments, and vacation money. Yet in family conversations, my business remained that website thing, or Abigail's project. My parents accepted my money while simultaneously dismissing its source. The cognitive dissonance was stunning. At one Sunday dinner, after my father spent 20 minutes lamenting how kids today don't understand the value of education, I finally broached the subject. "Dad, do you realize that my company now employs over 150 people? That we're projecting $12 million in revenue this year." He looked up from his pot roast, which I had paid for, and smiled condescendingly. "That's nice, honey. But these internet businesses come and go. What happens when it all disappears? At least your brother will have his engineering degree to fall back on." I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. "I've been running this internet business for 7 years now. It's not disappearing." "Don't get defensive," my mother interjected. "We're just concerned about your future." The irony was almost laughable. They were concerned about my future while living on my present success. I began to realize a painful truth. The financial support I provided wasn't bringing us closer. If anything, it was creating a strange dynamic where my achievements had to be minimized so that their worldview, education equals success, could remain intact. Acknowledging that my path had led to greater financial success than theirs would require rethinking core beliefs they weren't prepared to question. And so we maintained this strange dance. I continued supporting them financially while they continued treating me like a lucky child playing at business. The arrangement took an emotional toll I wasn't fully aware of until it all came crashing down on Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving had always been a big production in the Patterson household. This year was no different, despite the fact that I was footing the bill for the heritage turkey, premium wines, and all the trimmings. I'd even paid for the recent dining room renovation that showcased my mother's antique china and crystal. The house smelled of sage and butter as relatives filtered in aunts, uncles, cousins, my siblings, and their partners. I'd arrived early to help with preparations, eager for a rare day away from the office. Try Before was in the middle of our busiest season, with Black Friday and holiday shopping approaching, but family came first. I was in the kitchen transferring rolls to a basket when I overheard my father's voice from the living room. He was speaking to my Uncle Philip, not realizing how sound carried through the heating vent. "Sure, Abigail's little company is doing fine now," he was saying, "but she was just lucky with her timing. She wouldn't amount to much if her business failed. No education to fall back on, you know." My hands froze mid-task. The casual cruelty of his assessment, delivered so matter-of-factly, made my stomach clench. "Seems pretty successful to me," Uncle Philip replied. "Didn't she win some big award recently?" "Anyone can win awards these days," Dad responded dismissively. "But what has she really accomplished? No degree, no real credentials. Just got lucky with a website." I set down the basket before I could drop it, my hands trembling slightly. 7 years of 18-hour days. 7 years of solving problems, making payroll, creating opportunities for others. 7 years of supporting the very man who was dismissing everything I'd built. From the adjacent dining room, I heard my mother's voice joining the conversation. We do worry about Abigail's future stability. The internet is so unpredictable. Not like Jessica, and Linda chimed in, referencing my cousin who had recently completed medical school. You must be so proud of her accomplishment. Oh, we are, Mom agreed warmly. A doctor in the family. Now that's something. Something. Unlike whatever it was I had created. I moved mechanically through dinner preparations, a strange numbness spreading through me. When we finally sat down to eat, I found myself observing my family as if from a distance, these people who had known me my entire life yet somehow couldn't see me at all. Midway through the meal, during a lull in conversation, I decided to share some news I'd been saving. I have an announcement, I said, setting down my fork. Try Before won the National Retail Innovation Award last week. And I've received an acquisition offer for $22 million. A moment of stunned silence followed. $22 million? My brother Mark finally asked, eyes wide. I nodded. I haven't decided whether to accept yet. But yes, that's the offer. The table erupted in excited questions and exclamations from everyone except my parents. My father continued eating as if I'd mentioned nothing more significant than a change in weather. My mother offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. What would you even do with that kind of money? Dad finally asked, his tone suggesting I couldn't possibly have a sensible answer. Well, for starters, I've been considering expanding into a new market segment, I began. And perhaps anyone could get lucky like that, he interrupted, setting down his knife with precision. What will you do when it all disappears? You're still uneducated. The table fell silent. Even the clink of silverware stopped. Robert, my Aunt Linda murmured, clearly uncomfortable. But he wasn't finished. It's true. Jessica has built something real with her medical degree. That's a future. This internet money, it's just temporary. I stared at him, something breaking loose inside me after years of careful restraint. Temporary? Dad, I've been running this company for 7 years. I employ over 150 people. I've changed how women shop online. We just worry about your stability, my mother interjected, playing her usual role as peacekeeper. Your cousin Jessica is a doctor now. That's forever. The comparison was the final straw. Jessica is brilliant, and I'm happy for her, I said carefully. But why can't you be happy for me too? Why isn't what I've built good enough? Because it's not real, my father snapped. It's just internet nonsense that could vanish tomorrow. Not real. I felt a strange calm settling over me as years of suppressed frustration crystallized into clarity. Is the mortgage I paid off for you not real? Are Mom's medical bills I covered not real? Is Mark's college tuition not real? Is this renovation not real? My father's face flushed dark red. How dare you throw that in our faces? We never asked for your handouts. They weren't handouts, Dad. They were support from a daughter who loves her family despite never feeling good enough for them. We never said you weren't good enough, my mother protested weakly. You didn't have to say it. You showed it every time you dismissed my business as luck. Every time you called it temporary or questioned its legitimacy. My father pushed back from the table, standing so abruptly his chair nearly toppled. I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. The home I paid off, I said quietly. His expression contorted with rage. Get out, he hissed. Get out, you lowlife. No daughter of mine speaks to me this way. The word lowlife echoed in the stunned silence. My mother gasped, but said nothing in my defense. My siblings stared in shock. I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my plate. I'm a lowlife who built a $22 million company and supported her family for years. Interesting definition. I looked around the table, at the faces of my extended family witnessing this implosion. Some looked embarrassed, others uncomfortable. No one spoke up. I'll go, I said, voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. But let's be clear about what's happening here. I'm not being kicked out because I'm disrespectful. I'm being kicked out because I finally stopped accepting your disrespect. I walked out of the dining room, through the foyer with its new hardwood floors I had paid for, and out the front door. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I finally allowed the tears to come. 7 years of seeking approval from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. 7 years of proving my worth to those who had decided, long ago, that my path had no value. As I drove away from my childhood home, I didn't yet know that this breaking point would become my breakthrough. That sometimes the most painful rejections lead to the most necessary freedoms. I only knew that something had ended, and that despite the crushing pain in my chest, I had finally stood up for my truth. I spent that night in a hotel room, alternating between tears and a strange, hollow numbness. By morning, my eyes were swollen, but my mind had achieved an unnatural clarity. I took a personal day, my first in months, and sat by the window watching snow fall on the hotel parking lot. My phone had exploded with messages. From my sister Emma, Dad was way out of line. Are you okay? From my brother Mark, that was insane. Call me. Even from Aunt Linda, your father should never have spoken to you that way. Conspicuously absent were any messages from my parents. Around noon, I called my best friend Miranda, who had moved to Boston years earlier, but remained my emotional anchor. He called you a lowlife, she repeated after I recounted the previous night's events. Abby, that's not just disrespectful, it's cruel. Maybe I shouldn't have brought up the money, I said, still somehow finding ways to blame myself. Stop it, Miranda said firmly. You stated facts. He's been taking your money while belittling your success for years. That's not love, Abby. That's exploitation. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Exploitation. Had I been allowing myself to be used? But they're my parents, I whispered. I'm supposed to help them. Help, yes. Subject yourself to emotional abuse, no. Miranda's voice softened. Honey, would you let a friend or employee be treated the way your parents treat you? The question hung in the air. Of course I wouldn't. I'd built a company culture based on respect and recognition of achievement. I'd ended client relationships with companies that mistreated my team, yet I'd accepted, even enabled, this dynamic with my own family. Over the next few days, I made several attempts at reconciliation. I called my parents home multiple times, leaving voicemails when they didn't pick up. I sent an email saying I was open to talking when they were ready. I even drove by the house once, losing courage before I could knock on the door. A week passed. Then 2. Their silence spoke volumes. Meanwhile, the acquisition offer deadline was approaching. The potential buyers, a larger retail platform looking to incorporate our technology, needed an answer. The $22 million figure represented years of work, risk, and vision. It would provide financial security I'd never imagined possible for someone who'd grown up in a middle-class Midwestern household. I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Cassandra Wright, a therapist I'd started seeing earlier that year to help manage the stress of running a growing company. Now our session focused on something much more personal. Your parents have shown you exactly who they are and what they value, Dr. Wright said after listening to my story. The question is, can you accept that reality rather than continuing to hope for the parents you deserve but don't have? What about the acquisition? I asked. Part of me feels like if I take it, I'm giving up on proving myself to them. She leaned forward. Abigail, you've been trying to prove yourself for 7 years. At what point do you accept that the goalpost will keep moving? That night, I made 2 decisions. First, I would accept the acquisition offer. Second, I would use this opportunity to create distance, both physical and emotional, from the toxic family dynamic I'd been enabling. The next morning, I called Janet Kingsley, my initial investor and now board member. I'm accepting the offer, I told her. But I have one condition: I want to relocate the headquarters to Florida. Florida? She questioned. That's quite a change from Iowa. I need a fresh start, I said simply. Janet, who had become something of a mentor over the years, was silent for a moment. This is about your family, isn't it? I hadn't shared the details of Thanksgiving with her, but she was perceptive enough to have noticed the pattern over the years. Yes, I admitted. I can't keep trying to win approval. That's never going to come. It's affecting my mental health and, honestly, my leadership. You don't need my permission, she said kindly. But for what it's worth, I think it's the right call. Both the acquisition and the move. The wheels were set in motion. The acquisition would be structured as an initial payment with a 3-year earn-out period where I'd continue leading the division. The buyers were amenable to the Florida relocation, as they had offices in Miami already. During this transition period, my siblings reached out separately. Emma came to my office one afternoon, eyes red from crying. I should have said something at Thanksgiving, she said. I'm so sorry, Abby. I hugged her tightly. It's not your responsibility to fight my battles. But you've been fighting for all of us, she countered. The tuition, my wedding, Mom's medical bills. You've carried this family, and they treat you like you're nothing. Mark's approach was different. He called to tell me Dad had reached out to him about help with some expenses. I told him to ask you, he said. He said he'd rather not. What happened? Are you cutting them off? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't actually made that decision consciously, but I realized I'd stopped the automatic transfers to their account after Thanksgiving. I'm taking a step back, I said carefully. They can't treat me like I'm worthless while simultaneously relying on my financial support. That's fair, Mark conceded. But Abby, they really do need help. The old guilt surged up. What kind of help? The property taxes are due. And Mom needs some follow-up treatments. I closed my eyes, the familiar weight settling on my shoulders. The part of me that still craved their approval wanted to immediately solve the problem, to be the good daughter despite everything. But Dr. Wright's words echoed in my mind. At what point do you accept that the goalpost will keep moving? I'll think about it, I told Mark. That night, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I would no longer enable the toxic relationship with money. I drafted an email to my parents since they weren't taking my calls, explaining that while I loved them, I needed to establish healthy boundaries. I cannot continue to provide financial support to people who don't respect me or what I've built, I wrote. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect, I'll be here. Until then, I need to step back for my own well-being. I hit send before I could lose my nerve, then sat in the dark of my living room, crying for the relationship I'd hoped for but never had. 2 days later, the acquisition paperwork was finalized. The first installment, $12 million after taxes, was deposited into my account. The remaining $10 million would come through the earn-out period if targets were met. I was officially a millionaire many times over, and I had never felt more alone. That weekend, I flew to Florida to begin house hunting. As the plane lifted above the gray Iowa winter sky, I felt something unexpected beneath the sadness, a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, in leaving, I could finally find what I'd been searching for all along, not their approval, but my own peace. The beachfront property wasn't the largest or most expensive on the market, but something about it called to me immediately. 3 bedrooms, wraparound deck, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Gulf of Mexico. It was nothing like the practical Midwestern homes I'd grown up in. It was vibrant, open, and unapologetically beautiful. It's perfect, I told the realtor after the walkthrough. I'll take it. The speed of the decision surprised even me. After years of seeking approval for every choice, the freedom to follow my instincts felt almost dizzyingly liberating. I closed on the house in January and immediately hired a local designer to help furnish it. No more beige walls and practical furniture chosen for durability rather than joy. This home would reflect who I was becoming, not who I'd been told to be. Bold colors in the living areas. I instructed the designer, Lucia. And I want the main bedroom to feel like a sanctuary. She smiled, seeming to understand the subtext. Starting fresh. Completely, I confirmed. While the house was being prepared, I focused on the business transition. The acquiring company had been true to their word about keeping our team intact, though about a third chose not to relocate to Florida. For those who did make the move, I arranged generous relocation packages and temporary housing. Our new offices in Tampa were modern and bright, with views of the bay and an energy that felt aligned with our next chapter. The parent company largely left us to operate independently, appreciating that our unique culture was part of what made Try4 successful. By March, I was settled in my new home and finding my rhythm in this unfamiliar but welcoming environment. The perpetual sunshine felt metaphorically appropriate, a literal brightness after years in the shadow of disapproval. I made conscious efforts to build a social circle. I joined a beachside yoga class, attended local business networking events, and even tried paddleboarding lessons where I spent more time falling into the water than standing on the board. The instructor, a laid-back woman named Diane, became my first local friend. "You need to stop overthinking it," she advised during one particularly frustrating session. "Your body knows what to do if your mind would just get out of the way." The comment struck me as applicable to more than just paddleboarding. As spring bloomed into summer, my new life took shape. I established a routine that prioritized balance, something I'd never allowed myself in Iowa. Mornings began with coffee on the deck, watching dolphins play in the distance. Workdays were productive, but no longer all-consuming. Evenings often involved walks on the beach or dinners with new friends. I launched a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs without college degrees, remembering how isolating it had felt to forge that path alone. The Unconventional Founders initiative paired seasoned business owners with promising talent who lacked traditional credentials but possessed drive and vision. Education comes in many forms, I told the first cohort at our kickoff event. Some of the most valuable lessons can't be taught in classrooms. The program gave me a sense of purpose beyond the day-to-day business operations. It felt healing to create the support system I wished I'd had. Communication with my family had become sporadic. Emma called regularly, genuinely interested in my new life. Mark checked in occasionally, usually with updates about his engineering career or, more awkwardly, veiled references to our parents' continuing financial struggles. I maintained my boundary about financial support, though the guilt never fully dissipated. 6 months after my move, the doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone and was surprised to find my mother standing on my porch, looking small and out of place against the backdrop of palm trees and tropical flowers. "Mom," I said, genuinely shocked. What are you doing here?" "Your assistant gave me the address when I called your office," she explained. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, my mind racing. She looked around the open-concept living area with its turquoise accents and artistic touches, so different from her own traditional decor. "It's very bright," she offered, which from Helen Patterson constituted high praise for anything unconventional. I made coffee and we sat on the deck overlooking the water, an awkward silence stretching between us. Finally, she spoke. "Your father doesn't know I'm here." I figured as much. She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. "We're struggling, Abigail. The property taxes have doubled, and my treatments aren't fully covered by insurance." There it was, the real purpose of her visit. Not reconciliation, but financial necessity. "I see," I said quietly. "We're not asking for much," she continued. "Just what you used to send before Thanksgiving." I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the familiar pull of obligation. "Mom, I can't go back to how things were. Dad called me a lowlife and kicked me out of your lives. Neither of you has apologized or even acknowledged how hurtful that was." He was upset. "You know how he gets." "That's not an excuse for emotional abuse," I said, the therapy-derived term feeling foreign but accurate on my tongue. She flinched. "That's a very harsh way to describe family disagreements." "Is it? Would you accept a husband speaking to you the way Dad spoke to me? Would you advise a friend to maintain a relationship with someone who treated them that way?" She stared out at the ocean, avoiding my gaze. "It's different with family." "It shouldn't be," I countered. "If anything, family should treat us better than strangers do, not worse." We're your parents, Abigail. We need your help. The familiar guilt twisted in my stomach. I thought of all the resources I now had, the millions in my account, the comfortable lifestyle, the freedom. Wouldn't a good daughter share that abundance? Then I remembered Dr. Wright's guidance. Support without respect isn't love, it's exploitation. I can't help you financially while nothing changes in our relationship, I said firmly. I'm happy to help you both find financial planning resources or to connect Dad with job opportunities through my network. But I won't send money to people who don't respect me or what I've built. Her expression hardened. So that's your ultimatum? Either we pretend to approve of your choices or you'll let us struggle. The characterization stung, but I held firm. That's not what I said. I'm not asking for approval. I'm asking for basic respect. There's a difference. Your father was right, she said, standing abruptly. Success has changed you. No, Mom. What's changed is that I finally recognize my own worth, with or without your validation. She gathered her purse, her movements stiff with disapproval. Well, I guess we know where we stand. Either help us financially or you're not part of this family. The words hit like a physical blow, but somehow I remained standing. I'm already not part of the family in your eyes. I have been since the moment I chose my own path. She left without another word. I watched her rental car disappear down the Palm Line Street, then sank onto the deck steps, letting the tears come. The finality of the moment wasn't lost on me. She had traveled over 1,000 miles not to heal our relationship, but to reestablish the financial arrangement that benefited them. That evening, I walked along the shoreline as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The waves lapped gently at my feet, the rhythm somehow soothing the jagged edges of my pain. For the first time, I fully accepted that I might never have the parental relationship I'd longed for, and that continuing to chase it was preventing me from building the life I deserved. Sometimes the most difficult endings make the most necessary beginnings possible. As darkness fell over the gulf, I made peace with my choice. The family I was born into might never see my worth, but that didn't mean I couldn't create a chosen family who would. One year after moving to Florida, I stood on my deck watching a spectacular sunset, a glass of wine in hand and a sense of calm I'd once thought impossible. The anniversary hadn't been planned as a moment of reflection, but as the fiery orange sun melted into the Gulf waters, I couldn't help but measure the distance I'd traveled, not just geographically, but emotionally. The acute pain of family rejection had gradually transformed into something else, a quiet wisdom that I carried like a smooth stone in my pocket, occasionally turning over to examine, but no longer sharp enough to draw blood. The business continued to thrive under the new ownership structure. Our user base had expanded by 30%, and the technology we'd pioneered was being implemented across the parent company's other platforms. I'd met all the first-year earnout targets, securing another portion of the acquisition payment. But the most significant changes weren't professional or financial, they were internal. I'd spent so many years seeking external validation that learning to trust my own judgment felt like discovering a new sense. Decisions that once would have triggered anxious second-guessing now came more naturally, guided by intuition and experience rather than fear of disapproval. I'd begun working on a new venture, a platform connecting self-taught professionals with companies looking beyond traditional credentials in their hiring practices. The project stemmed from my own experience and the Unconventional Founders Mentorship Program, which had grown to support over 50 entrepreneurs across the country. This time, the work felt different. I wasn't building to prove my worth or to earn recognition. I was creating from a place of purpose and joy because the work mattered, not because I needed it to validate my existence. My social circle had expanded to include a diverse group of friends who knew me as I was now, not as the perpetual disappointment I'd been cast as in my family narrative. We gathered for beach bonfires, community volunteer days, and lazy Sunday brunches where conversations flowed naturally, unburdened by decades of unspoken resentments. Therapy continued to be a cornerstone of my healing journey. Dr. Wright had connected me with a colleague in Tampa, Dr. Martinez, who specialized in family estrangement and adult children of emotionally immature parents. The hardest part for many people, Dr. Martinez observed during one session, is accepting that they didn't do anything wrong. That sometimes, no matter how perfect you try to be, some parents are simply incapable of giving the love and recognition their children deserve. That permission to stop blaming myself for a dynamic I hadn't created was perhaps the most liberating aspect of my healing. In April, my phone rang with an unexpected caller ID, Emma. "Hey, stranger," I answered, smiling. Though we spoke regularly, she rarely called midweek. "I did something you might not like," she began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Should I be sitting down for this?" "Maybe." "I'm at the Tampa airport." I nearly dropped the phone. "You're here?" "In Florida." "Surprise," she offered weakly. "I can get a hotel if it's not a good time." "Don't you dare." "Send me your terminal information. I'm leaving now to get you." An hour later, we were sitting on my deck, the early evening breeze ruffling Emma's hair as she took in the view. "It's even more beautiful than your photos," she said. "I can see why you love it here." "It's home now," I replied simply. "But what brings you all this way without warning? Is everything okay?" She set down her iced tea, expression turning serious. "I wanted to apologize. In person." "For what?" "For not standing up for you. At Thanksgiving and all the times before that. For accepting your help with my wedding while letting them dismiss everything you've built." Her eyes filled with tears. "For being a coward." I reached for her hand. "Emma, you weren't a coward. You were surviving a difficult family dynamic, just like I was. But you were brave enough to walk away. To demand respect." She wiped at her eyes. "I've been playing along, keeping the peace. And watching how they talk about you when you're not there. It's not right, Abby." "What do they say?" I asked, not sure I wanted to know but needing to hear it anyway. "Dad acts like you abandoned them in their time of need. Like you owe them support, but withheld it out of spite." She shook her head. "He never mentions calling you a lowlife or how he's belittled your success for years. And Mom goes along with his version of events." The information hurt, but less than it once would have. "I'm not surprised." "I tried to defend you at Easter dinner," Emma continued. "I pointed out everything you'd done for the family before the fallout. Dad accused me of taking sides and Mom cried. It was awful. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle. That's just it. I don't want to be in the middle anymore." She straightened, a determination in her expression I'd rarely seen. "I want to be firmly on the side of truth. Which is why I came to apologize and to tell you I understand now. You made the right choice." Those words, "you made the right choice," unlocked something I hadn't realized was still tightly bound within me. A remaining doubt that perhaps I'd been too harsh, too unforgiving, too willing to walk away from family. Hearing my sister's validation felt like permission to finally, fully release that last thread of guilt. During Emma's 4-day visit, we talked more openly than we ever had growing up in our parents' home. She shared her own struggles with our father's impossible standards and our mother's conflict avoidance. I showed her my new life, the business, the mentorship program, the community I'd built. On her last night, as we walked along the moonlit beach, Emma asked, "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm open to a relationship if it can be healthy. But I've stopped expecting them to change or to suddenly see me clearly." That acceptance has been the most healing part of this whole journey. "You seem lighter," she observed. "More yourself." "I am," I agreed. Turns out living for your own approval is much simpler than chasing someone else's. The months that followed brought unexpected developments. My TED Talk on success beyond credentials went viral, bringing attention to both the mentorship program and my new platform. I received hundreds of messages from people who'd faced similar family dynamics after choosing unconventional paths. "Your story gave me courage to stop apologizing for my choices," one young entrepreneur wrote. I dropped out of college 3 years ago to start my business, and my parents still introduce me as taking a break from school. Hearing how you navigated similar judgment helped me set boundaries without guilt. These connections reminded me that personal stories, when shared authentically, create bridges between experiences. The pain I'd endured now served a purpose greater than my own growth. It offered others permission to trust their own paths. In July, I received an unexpected email from Mark. Dad had a minor heart attack. He's stable, but it was a scare. Thought you should know. I sat with the news, checking in with my emotions. The old pattern would have been immediate guilt and rushing to fix everything. Instead, I felt compassion without responsibility. After talking it through with Dr. Martinez, I sent flowers to the hospital with a simple note, wishing you a speedy recovery. Abigail. I didn't offer money. I didn't fly home. I acknowledged the situation without reactivating the unhealthy dynamic. It was a small moment, but it represented enormous growth. As the 1-year anniversary of my move approached, I realized I wanted to mark the occasion meaningfully. I decided to host a gathering at my home, part housewarming, part celebration of new beginnings. I invited my local friends, business associates, ments from the program, and Emma, who promised to fly down for the weekend. The evening of the party, my home filled with laughter and conversation. People from different parts of my new life connected with each other, creating a tapestry of relationships I'd never imagined possible a year earlier. After dinner, as everyone gathered on the deck for dessert, Emma clinked her glass for attention. I want to propose a toast, she announced. To my sister, Abigail. A year ago, she made one of the hardest decisions anyone can make, to choose herself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. She left behind criticism and conditional love to build this beautiful life where she can shine as brightly as she was always meant to. To Abigail, and to the courage it takes to begin again. Glasses raised as tears filled my eyes. Looking around at these people who accepted me exactly as I was, who celebrated rather than diminished my achievements, I felt a profound sense of homecoming that had nothing to do with geography. Later, after the guests had gone and Emma had retired to the guest room, I sat alone on the beach watching the rhythm of waves in the moonlight. The journey from that devastating Thanksgiving to this moment of contentment hadn't been linear or easy. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt, and plenty of tears. But sitting there with sand between my toes and stars overhead, I knew with bone-deep certainty that I wouldn't trade this hard-won peace for any amount of conditional family approval. Sometimes the most painful rejections lead us exactly where we need to be. Sometimes losing what we thought we needed makes room for what we truly deserve. And sometimes, the family we create through choice proves more nurturing than the one we were born into. As I watched the gentle Gulf waters reflecting moonlight, I whispered a thank you to my younger self who had found the courage to walk away, not from family, but toward authenticity. Toward a life measured not by others' narrow definitions of success, but by the freedom to define it for myself. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between pleasing others and honoring yourself? Have you found the courage to walk away from relationships that diminished rather than celebrated you? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more reflections on building a life of authentic success. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest freedom. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.